So what happens when a $73 billion dream starts to completely fall apart? Well, in the tech world, you get one of the most confusing, head-scratching stories of the year, Meta's insane whiplash on its Metaverse app, Horizon Worlds. I mean, one week it was basically dead, and the next it was suddenly back. Let's break down what on earth is actually going on. And, to really set the scene here, get this. This is the actual opening line from the TechCrunch article that broke the story of the reversal. That one sentence, it tells you just about everything you need to know about how skeptical people were that anyone was even using Horizon Worlds. Ouch. This all went down in one absolutely chaotic week. So first, Meta had already been hinting it would end VR support. Then, on March 17th, they made it official. The VR version was shutting down. But then just 2 days later, Meta's CTO Andrew Bosworth hops on Instagram and announces the complete opposite. So what in the world is behind this unbelievable back and forth? To really understand this, we first have to look at why shutting it all down made a lot of sense in the first place. And that brings us to our first section. We're calling it a virtual ghost town and the logic behind that initial plan. Here's the most crucial point. The fact that they were even thinking about a shutdown was a massive admission from Meta. It was basically them saying, hey, you know that core vision we had for the metaverse? People socializing in VR? Yeah, it's not working. It just turns out that very, very few people actually wanted to hang out there. And why was that failure so incredibly significant? Well, because of this number, $73 billion. That is the staggering amount of money Meta's Reality Labs division, the part of the company building all this, has lost since 2021. Just let that number sink in. And to put that number in perspective, because it's almost impossible to grasp, to burn through $73 billion, you would have to spend $1 million every single day for 200 years. That's the almost incomprehensible amount of money they invested in a vision that, by their own actions, they admitted was failing. And look, this wasn't just a Horizon Worlds problem. The whole VR market is really struggling right now. Meta's own Quest headset sales, down 16% year over year. Even Apple had to scale back production of its much-hyped Vision Pro. Then you add in over 1,500 layoffs in Meta's Reality Labs with rumors of more to come. And yeah, you can see why they were looking for an exit ramp. So if the big VR dream was dying, where could Meta possibly find a lifeline for its colossal investment? Well, the answer, as it turns out, was already sitting in everyone's pocket. Which brings us to the pivot to mobile. And you don't have to take my word for it. These are the CTO's own words explaining the logic. He basically said the team was doing double the work, building once for VR, then again for mobile. So focusing on mobile wasn't just about finding a bigger audience. It was a really practical decision to speed things up and stop wasting resources. And this slide really breaks down that strategic difference, right? You've got virtual reality on one side, a pretty small audience, and like we just heard, it really slowed development down. But on the mobile side, you have a massive potential audience, and it lets the team build way faster. From a business perspective, the choice seems, kind of obvious. And the data really backs this up. The mobile version is actually showing some really positive signs. Downloads jumped from about 983,000 this time last year to 1.5 million so far this year. That is a 53% increase year over year. So the app is finally finding an audience. It's just not where Meta originally expected to find it. Okay, so downloads are growing and the strategy is shifting to mobile. Problem solved, right? Well, not exactly. And this brings us to our final and maybe most critical section, an uncertain future. Because the big question still remains, can any of this ever translate into actual money? And here is the absolutely brutal reality. Across 45 million total downloads, consumers have spent just $1.1 million inside the app ever. When you put that next to the $73 billion investment, the gap is it's hard to even comprehend. The Source article puts it perfectly. That $1.1 million in revenue isn't just small, it's pocket change when you measure it against the literal mountain of cash Meta has poured into this thing. It just shows you the massive gap between people using the app and anyone actually spending money in it. So let's just summarize this whole conflict here. On the one hand, you have the potential side, right? 45 million total downloads, really strong growth on mobile. But then you look at the problem side, and it's just overwhelming. A tiny VR user base, hardware sales that are going down, that insane $73 billion investment, and revenue that barely even registers. And all of this leaves us with the final, haunting question for Meta. Even if they have a successful pivot to mobile, can this app ever hope to justify the $73 billion dream that started it all? That is the question they are still desperately trying